A simple woman humiliated during a deposit, treated like an outsider at a prestigious bank. The manager points her finger, demanding she leave. But when her billionaire husband steps forward, the entire bank is utterly shocked, forever changing how they judge others. The gleaming marble floors of Atlantic National Bank reflected the morning sunlight as Sarah Morgan approached the entrance. At 34, dressed in comfortable gray sweatpants and a simple t-shirt, she carried herself with quiet confidence despite her casual appearance. Her husband, Daniel Morgan, walked beside her, his tailored navy suit and subtle platinum watch marking him as someone of significant means. At 42, he had built Morgan Capital Partners into one of the nation's leading investment firms, though he carried his success with understated dignity. "Are you sure you want to handle this alone?" Daniel asked, checking his watch. "Absolutely," Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand. "I've always managed the foundation's affairs independently. That was our agreement." Their relationship had always been based on mutual respect. Despite access to unimaginable wealth, Sarah chose to live simply, pouring her energy into her educational foundation that helped underprivileged children. "I'll take that call from Singapore in the lobby while you get started," Daniel said. "It shouldn't take long." They entered the bank together, drawing contrasting reactions. Several employees straightened at the sight of Daniel's bespoke suit, while Sarah's casual attire earned barely concealed looks of confusion. Today's visit was unusual because the foundation typically operated through electronic transfers, but their newest educational initiative required establishing a separate account with documentation that needed in-person handling. As Sarah approached the customer service area, Daniel stepped aside to take his international call, his voice fading as he discussed investment strategies with his team in Asia. The morning light caught Sarah's simple wedding band as she reached the desk of Rebecca Palmer, the bank's customer service manager. Rebecca's perfectly styled blonde hair and crisp white blouse projected an image of polished professionalism, though the tightness around her eyes hinted at underlying tension. Neither woman realized that this routine transaction was about to become an unforgettable lesson in judgment and consequences. Rebecca Palmer was having a particularly difficult morning. The promotion she'd spent years positioning herself for had just gone to someone from another branch. Her carefully applied makeup concealed the redness around her eyes, but nothing could hide the brittleness in her smile. When she spotted Sarah approaching in sweatpants and a t-shirt, Rebecca immediately categorized her as someone who had wandered into the wrong place. Atlantic National wasn't just any bank. It was where Boston's elite conducted their financial affairs. "Good morning," Sarah said pleasantly. "I'd like to make a deposit and open a new account, please." Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And do you currently have an account with us?" Her tone carried subtle doubt. "No, this would be a new relationship," Sarah explained, placing a large check in a folder on the desk. "It's for the Morgan Educational Foundation. We're establishing a new program that requires a separate account." Rebecca glanced at the check, her eyebrows rising slightly at the six-figure amount. Her expression shifted from dismissive to suspicious. "That's a substantial deposit," she said, making no move to take the check. "May I ask where these funds originated?" "The foundation raised these funds through our annual benefit," Sarah explained. "All the documentation is here, including our 501c3 certification." A few customers at nearby desks began to notice the exchange. Rebecca's voice had that carrying quality that drew attention. "I'm sorry, but we don't typically establish accounts of this magnitude without proper verification," Rebecca said, louder now. "Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding about our institution's requirements." Sarah maintained her composure, though her cheeks flushed slightly. "The foundation's CFO called ahead to confirm the process. We were told all the necessary documentation is included here." Rebecca's smile tightened. "Ms. Morgan, Sarah Morgan. Ms. Morgan, Atlantic National serves a particular clientele. Our high net worth customers expect a certain environment." Rebecca gestured vaguely at Sarah's attire. "I'm not convinced this is the right banking relationship for someone of your profile." The words hung in the air like a slap. Several nearby customers stopped their transactions to watch. A young bank associate looked uncomfortably between them, clearly uncertain whether to intervene. "Is there a problem with the documentation?" Sarah asked, her voice quieter but steady. Rebecca's gaze became more pointed. Let's be direct. This check is for $250,000. People who handle legitimate transactions of that size generally don't show up, looking like they've just come from the gym. It raises questions. Sarah's eyes widened. The Morgan Educational Foundation is completely legitimate. We've been operating for 5 years and have helped over 10,000 children. Rebecca leaned forward, her voice dropping to a stage whisper, still perfectly audible to those nearby. Perhaps you should try a different institution, one more accustomed to dealing with your type of clientele. I'd hate for us to need to escalate this situation. The threat was thinly veiled. Several customers were now openly watching, some with disapproval, others with the morbid curiosity of witnessing someone else's humiliation. "Are you refusing to accept this deposit?" Sarah asked, struggling to maintain her composure. Rebecca's finger came up, pointing directly at Sarah in a gesture of dismissal. "I'm suggesting that you take your business elsewhere before I need to call security. We take potential financial irregularities very seriously at Atlantic National." The accusation hung in the air. Sarah stood frozen, the color draining from her face as she became acutely aware of the spectators too, her humiliation. Across the lobby, Daniel Morgan ended his call and turned, his expression changing instantly as he registered the scene unfolding. If stories of justice and unexpected moments of truth resonate with you, hit that subscribe button now. Our channel brings you powerful stories that might just change how you see the world. Daniel Morgan ended his call abruptly, his attention captured by the unmistakable tension across the lobby. Even from a distance, he could see Sarah's rigid posture and the flush spreading across her face. The blonde bank manager was leaning forward aggressively, her finger pointed directly at his wife in a gesture of unmistakable dismissal. For a moment, Daniel observed the scene with the calculated patience that had made him legendary in business circles. His eyes narrowed as he registered the public humiliation being inflicted on Sarah, the woman who had spent years pouring her heart into helping underprivileged children who deliberately chose to live simply despite having access to unimaginable wealth. He crossed the marble floor with measured steps, his presence causing subtle ripples of recognition. A security guard straightened his posture. A bank associate did a double take. Daniel heard fragments of Rebecca's words as he approached. "Clearly not the type of client this institution caters to. Suggest you take your supposedly charitable donations elsewhere." Sarah caught sight of Daniel, relief washing over her features. Rebecca, too engrossed in her power play, remained oblivious to his approach. "Is there a problem here?" Daniel asked, his voice quiet but carrying unmistakable authority. Rebecca turned, irritation flickering across her face at the interruption, an expression that froze mid-formation as she registered the impeccably tailored navy suit, the subtle platinum watch, and the air of absolute confidence that no amount of money could purchase. Rebecca began, her customer service smile snapping back into place. "Sir, I'm handling a situation with this person. Perhaps one of our other associates can assist you." Daniel's expression remained neutral as he stepped beside Sarah, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I believe you're handling a situation with my wife." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap before silence. Rebecca's face underwent a remarkable transformation. Confusion, followed by dawning recognition, culminating in an expression of pure horror as the implications cascaded through her mind. "Your wife?" she repeated, her voice suddenly an octave higher. "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "Sarah Morgan, founder of the Morgan Educational Foundation." He gestured to the check on the desk. "I see she's making the deposit for our new literacy program." The color drained from Rebecca's face as her gaze darted between Sarah's casual clothes and Daniel's expensive suit, her world realigning with sickening speed. The young bank associate who had been watching took a small step backward, distancing himself from what was clearly becoming a catastrophic situation. "Mr. Morgan," Rebecca stammered, recognition finally dawning completely. "Daniel Morgan of Morgan Capital Partners? There's been a terrible misunderstanding." "Has there?" Daniel asked, his tone conversational, but with an undercurrent that made several onlookers wince. "From where I was standing, it appeared my wife was being publicly humiliated for not meeting your personal dress code standards." Rebecca's hands fluttered nervously. "Sir, I was simply following protocol for large deposits." By suggesting she might be committing fraud, Daniel interrupted, his voice still calm, but carrying through the now silent bank lobby. By threatening to call security? That's standard protocol at Atlantic National? The commotion had drawn attention throughout the bank. From his office overlooking the main floor, Walter Thompson, the bank's president, noticed the growing crowd. His eyes narrowed as he recognized Daniel Morgan, not just a client, but one whose personal and business accounts represented over $300 million in deposits and investments. "Mr. Morgan, please," Rebecca pleaded, her professional demeanor crumbling. "If I had known who Mrs. Morgan was—" "And that's precisely the problem," Sarah spoke up, her quiet dignity returning. "The issue isn't how you treated me specifically. It's that you believe people deserve different levels of respect based on their perceived wealth or status." Daniel nodded. "The irony being that my wife could have walked in wearing designer clothes and flashing status symbols. She chooses not to because she believes character matters more than appearances." A murmur rippled through the gathered spectators. Several nodded in silent agreement. "What's happening here?" The authoritative voice cut through the tension as Walter Thompson approached, his expression shifting from professional concern to recognition. "Mr. Morgan, this is an unexpected pleasure." "Walter," Daniel acknowledged with a slight nod. "I wish I could say the same. Unfortunately, my wife has just been subjected to treatment that I find difficult to reconcile with our 15-year banking relationship." Thompson's gaze darted between Sarah, Daniel, and Rebecca, whose complexion had taken on an ashen quality. His expression made it clear that the consequences of this encounter would extend far beyond this moment, transforming not just one career, but potentially the culture of an entire institution. The glass walls of Walter Thompson's office did nothing to contain the intensity unfolding within. Rebecca Palmer stood with her shoulders drawn back in a posture of defensive dignity that belied the trembling of her clasped hands. Thompson's usually measured gestures had given way to emphatic movements that punctuated his words with unmistakable gravity. Throughout the bank, conversations hushed as covert glances tracked the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, Thomas, the young associate whose silent discomfort had been evident during Sarah's humiliation, stepped forward with quiet purpose. "Mrs. Morgan, if you'll allow me, I'd be honored to complete your foundation's account setup," he offered, his voice carrying a gentle respect that stood in stark contrast to Rebecca's earlier dismissiveness. As Thomas processed the paperwork with meticulous care, he hesitated before adding, "Your literacy program helped my younger sister last year. She struggled with reading her whole life until she found your resources." Sarah's expression softened with genuine interest. "What's her name?" "Lily," he replied, a hint of pride warming his voice. "She read an entire book by herself last month. My parents couldn't stop crying." Before Sarah could respond, Thompson's office door swung open. Rebecca emerged first, her composure clearly fragile beneath a veneer of professional restraint. The redness rimming her eyes betrayed emotions that her rigid posture attempted to conceal. Thompson followed, his face etched with the gravity of a man confronting an institutional failure rather than a mere employee misstep. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, I would value a moment of your time," he said, gesturing toward a private conference room adorned with tasteful artwork depicting Boston's historic financial district. "Thomas, please ensure the Foundation's paperwork receives priority processing." Once the heavy mahogany door closed behind them, Thompson took a deliberate breath before speaking. "First, please accept my profound personal apology for what transpired today. This represents more than an individual failing. It reveals a cultural blind spot within our institution that I find deeply troubling." Daniel's expression remained measured, the controlled calm of a man who had navigated countless high-stakes negotiations. "Walter, our relationship spans 15 years. During that time, Morgan Capital has directed over 30 high-value clients to Atlantic National, representing nearly $1 billion in assets." "I'm acutely aware," Thompson acknowledged, the weight of those figures evident in his carefully modulated tone. "Then you understand this extends far beyond today's incident," Daniel continued. "Sarah wasn't mistreated because she's my wife. She was mistreated because she didn't fit someone's narrow vision of what belongs in these marble halls. How many others have faced similar judgment without having the means to demand accountability?" Sarah leaned forward, her quiet voice carrying a clarity that commanded attention. "Mr. Thompson, I'm less concerned with apologies than with meaningful change. What happens tomorrow when another person dressed in simple clothes comes in, carrying their life savings or a community organization's hopes? Thompson studied her with newfound respect, noting the intelligence and purpose that Rebecca had so blindly overlooked. "What would you suggest?" he asked Sarah directly, a subtle acknowledgement that had not gone unnoticed by Daniel, whose expression softened marginally. "Institute comprehensive bias training for every staff member," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Create clear policies establishing respect as non-negotiable, regardless of appearance or account size. And establish a partnership with our foundation to create pathways for students from underserved communities into financial services." Thompson's expression reflected genuine consideration rather than mere placation. "And Ms. Palmer?" Daniel asked, his tone making it clear this was not a peripheral concern. "She has been removed from client-facing roles, effective immediately," Thompson responded. "Her future with Atlantic National will depend on whether she demonstrates authentic understanding of why her actions were fundamentally unacceptable." A knock interrupted them. Thomas entered with the completed paperwork, his posture reflecting both professionalism and purpose. "Everything has been processed according to the foundation specifications," he reported. Then, with a moment's hesitation, "Mr. Thompson, I believe you should know that Mrs. Morgan's foundation provides the literacy program that transformed my sister's educational journey. Without their intervention, she might have been another statistic, another child lost in a system not designed to accommodate different learning styles." As Thomas departed, Thompson's expression shifted as abstract concepts of community service crystallized into the concrete reality of a changed life, a transformation from numbers on a donation check to a child's reclaimed future. "I believe we have an opportunity here," Thompson said thoughtfully, "not merely to address a wrong, but to create something meaningful from this moment." Daniel's guarded expression invited elaboration without commitment. "In addition to implementing Mrs. Morgan's suggestions, I propose establishing a dedicated community banking initiative specifically designed to serve nonprofit organizations and community development projects," Thompson continued, "with particular attention to removing barriers that might discourage or exclude worthy causes seeking financial partnerships." Sarah studied him with the careful discernment that had guided her foundation's growth. "This isn't about charitable gestures or public relations, Mr. Thompson." "I understand that now," he replied, unexpected humility tempering his executive confidence. "It's about recognizing inherent dignity and dismantling barriers that have no place in banking or society." In the lobby, a scene of quiet reckoning unfolded. Rebecca Palmer gathered her personal items, her movements mechanical as she processed the consequences cascading from what she had dismissed as routine judgment. As she prepared to leave, she paused beside Thomas's desk. "Your sister," she said, her voice barely carrying above the ambient sounds of the bank. "She wrote that essay in the Boston Chronicle last month about overcoming reading difficulties." Thomas looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "Yes. How did you know?" Rebecca swallowed visibly. "My son struggles with reading too. I kept that article." The admission seemed to cost her something, a crack in the facade of perfection she had cultivated so carefully. As the Morgans emerged from the conference room, the atmosphere throughout the bank had transformed. The earlier spectacle of humiliation had given way to something more complex, a collective recognition that systems built on appearance-based judgments ultimately diminish everyone involved. Rebecca stood uncertainly near the exit, trapped between the imperative to leave and the need for resolution. After a moment's consideration, Sarah approached her. "Mrs. Morgan," Rebecca began, her voice barely audible. "I can't undo what happened, but—" "No, you can't," Sarah agreed, her tone firm yet absent the vindictiveness Rebecca clearly expected. "But I understand you have a son who struggles with reading." Rebecca's startled expression confirmed Thomas had shared this detail. "The foundation hosts a workshop next Thursday for parents of children with learning differences," Sarah continued, retrieving a business card from her purse. "You should attend." Rebecca accepted the card with unsteady fingers as Sarah added, "Sometimes we judge others harshly because we're fighting battles no one sees. Your son deserves every opportunity to thrive, regardless of how he learns." As the Morgans departed, whispers followed them, not of scandal or confrontation, but of something more profound. the realization that wealth manifests most powerfully not in possessions or appearances, but in how we treat those we believe can offer us nothing in return. Daniel squeezed Sarah's hand as they walked toward their car. "After how she treated you, you still offered her son help," he said quietly. "That's why I fell in love with you 15 years ago, and why I fall in love all over again every day." Sarah smiled, the simple gesture illuminating her face with a radiance no designer outfit could ever bestow. "Everyone deserves the chance to become better than their worst moment," she replied. "Sometimes transformation begins precisely when our certainties have been most thoroughly shattered." As they drove away, Atlantic National Bank stood on the threshold of its own transformation, one that would ripple outward in ways no one could yet imagine, touching lives far beyond its imposing walls. 6 months later, Sarah stood before a diverse audience, her simple elegance unchanged despite the national recognition her foundation had recently received. "Real change," she addressed the gathering of educators, parents, and financial professionals, happens when opportunity meets accountability. The Atlantic National Community Banking Initiative had launched 8 weeks earlier, with Thomas Chen, now appointed as Community Outreach Director, guiding its development. The program had already established financial partnerships with 27 community organizations previously overlooked by traditional banking institutions. Walter Thompson sat in the front row, his journey from bank president to advocate for institutional change evident in his attentive posture. Daniel sat beside him, pride illuminating his features as he watched Sarah articulate the vision they had built together. And 3 rows back, less conspicuous but equally engaged, sat Rebecca Palmer. The months since that fateful day at the bank had transformed her in visible ways. After attending her first parent workshop, she had gradually become involved with the foundation, eventually emerging as an effective advocate for families navigating learning differences. "The simple path," Sarah continued, "is to assess worth through appearances, through clothing, possessions, or account balances. The meaningful path requires recognizing the dignity inherent in every person, regardless of external markers." The presentation screens displayed images of community initiatives now flourishing with proper financial support. Educational programs, neighborhood improvement projects, senior services, all benefiting from banking relationships that would have been impossible under previous paradigms. After the presentation, Rebecca approached Sarah with a folder in hand. "My son's latest assessment," she explained, revealing dramatic improvements in reading metrics. "The techniques your foundation recommended changed everything for him." She hesitated before adding, "I think about that day at the bank constantly. How quickly I judged you, how easily I dismissed you. And now," Sarah prompted gently, "now I understand that I was the one who didn't belong in that bank, not because of my appearance, but because of how I behaved." Rebecca's smile carried both regret and hope. "I'm grateful my lowest moment became my turning point." Across the room, Thompson engaged in earnest conversation with Daniel. "The initiative has exceeded every projection," Thompson reported, "not just in community goodwill, but in solid business growth. It turns out serving underrepresented communities creates sustainable value." Daniel nodded. "The most effective solutions often do, not because they are designed for profit, but because they address authentic needs that have gone unmet." As evening descended, Sarah and Daniel walked through the community garden that had been the foundation's first project years ago. Now flourishing with fall vegetables, it stood as living testament that meaningful change begins with small, consistent efforts. "What strikes me most," Sarah reflected, her breath visible in the cool evening air, "is that Rebecca has become one of our most effective advocates. Our harshest critics truly can become our strongest allies when given the opportunity to see differently." Daniel wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "That's because you didn't simply want justice that day. You wanted transformation." Sarah leaned into his embrace, watching as garden lights illuminated pathways between carefully tended plots. "The work continues," she said, "but every time I see a parent like Rebecca advocating for their child, or a banker like Thomas creating pathways where none existed before, I'm reminded that change is possible." "One person at a time," Daniel affirmed. "One assumption challenged at a time," Sarah added with quiet conviction. Together they walked on, 2 people whose power to influence systems came not primarily from their financial resources, but from their unwavering belief that every person deserves to be seen, valued, and respected, regardless of the clothes they wear or the assumptions others might make about their worth. If this story touched your heart, remember that every day presents opportunities to look beyond appearances and recognize the dignity in those around us. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge perspectives and inspire positive change. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and share a time when you experienced or witnessed judgment based on appearances. Until next time, remember that true wealth isn't measured by what we possess, but by how we treat others, especially those who can offer us nothing in return.